Gary, fifth thing, again, going to our investment research. This time we've got a question out of the University of Tennessee, assuming one of Andrew's finance
It is, yeah.
buddies ask a great question as it relates to Bitcoin. So to close out this week's edition, the central bankers are delusional issue. Got a question about Bitcoin, Gary, and it is thing number 5. What are you actually buying when you invest in Bitcoin?
Yeah, this is a phenomenal question. And one of the sort of the follow-up question that the student asked, he wants to know, is Bitcoin like the dollar or more like an asset such as gold? And I think these are two phenomenal questions. So first of all, what are you buying when you invest in Bitcoin? And basically, you are buying a notation in the blockchain that says a particular Bitcoin or a particular fraction of a Bitcoin belongs to you. And, it's one of the key reasons why we recommend self-custody, because it's yours and you should have it. You should have custody of it. If you own Bitcoin and you need help with self-custody, reach out. We will help you with that. Whatever you do, do not leave it on the exchanges. If you leave your Bitcoin on the exchange, you do not own that Bitcoin. You are an unsecured creditor to Coinbase or, one of the other platforms. So technically what you own is a notation on the blockchain that says this is yours. But the key thing is it's the limited supply. And so at this point, approximately 95% of all Bitcoin that will ever be mined have already been mined. And over the next, almost 150 years, a little bit less than that, the remaining 5% will be mined until the total of 21 million Bitcoin are mined. There will never be any more than that. And it's that digital scarcity that gives Bitcoin value at a time when every central bank is printing and printing and printing and creating currency and debasing their currencies. And we're all experiencing that through inflation. We also have seen a lot of situations where governments have tried to use the banks to say, hey, you bank cannot fund this business, or, hey, we don't like your politics or your comments or your social media posts, and so we're going to deny you banking services. And we saw that in Canada just, a couple of years ago during the trucker incident, the trucker protest. Now, whether you agree with the truckers or not doesn't matter. You can agree or disagree, but the key thing is they were debanked. With Bitcoin, that can't happen. And so what you have with Bitcoin is you have something where you have digital scarcity and a notation guaranteeing your ownership of it. It can't be taken away by the government. That follow-up question, is Bitcoin more like the dollar or more like gold? I think it's a phenomenal question, in my opinion, and people may have a different point of view. If you have a different point of view, put it in the comments. I think it's a hybrid. So I think Bitcoin is a lot like gold because you have a relatively limited amount of supply. It's very hard, meaning the increase is, in the case of gold, about 1.5% per year. In the case of Bitcoin, less than that. So that's your increase in supply as a percentage of the supply that you have. And so in that way, I think it's a lot like gold. The way it's like the dollar is Bitcoin can be used like a currency. Now, gold has been considered money for thousands of years, but gold is very hard to spend, right? You can't go to a coffee shop or a clothing store. You go buy a car. You can't say, hey, here are a few ounces of gold and, give me a car. It just doesn't work that way. You'd have to sell it for dollars. But in the case of Bitcoin, and, El Salvador has been doing incredible work on this, but I've seen it in plenty of other places. You can actually use Bitcoin like a currency and use it to buy a coffee or a car. In some places, including Japan, you can use Bitcoin to pay your taxes. And, people will point out, well, you're not really paying for it in Bitcoin. There's a currency conversion happening. Yeah, all of that's true. It is not a perfect analog. This is not a perfect example, but this is the direction we're heading, and I like it. I'm in favor of people having more economic freedom. I'm in favor of people having more control of their financial health, and Bitcoin does that for people. It takes them out of the debased fiat monetary system. It means they don't need a bank, and it gives people more freedom. And for that alone, we're huge fans. Deep Knowledge Investing recommended Bitcoin, I want to say 3 years ago, maybe four
Yep.
years ago, something like that, when it was 15,000. Yeah,
Right
I
around
think
that.
it was the fourth quarter of 2020. So 4 years ago, it's up 4.5x since then in dollars. Um, and if you're holding Bitcoin, the price of whatever you would buy it with, whether you're buying a house or a car or whatever it is going down in Bitcoin, where in dollars those prices are going up. So, I think everybody should own some Bitcoin. Also worth pointing out, uh, last I checked, there were $44 million millionaires in the world and a total of 21 million Bitcoin. So if every millionaire in the world wanted to own one Bitcoin, they can't do it. Go get yourself a Bitcoin. You'll have something that there will be millionaires that can't ever own.
Gary, one of the questions is why would you be comfortable with the value of the dollar, right? When you're talking about the value of Bitcoin versus the value of the dollar, the response is backed by faith and credit. Why is that problematic with the situation that we find ourselves in?
So one thing I find really interesting is people, and I think this is a normal, understandable question. They say, "Hey, but what do you really own if you own Bitcoin? It's just a notation on a ledger. What if it's stolen? What if it's a fraud? And I understand this. People grew up using cash, and so they feel comfortable with it. And Bitcoin is newish technology, and they're saying, wait a minute, how do we know? How do we know this is real? How do we know it'll maintain its value? What do we really have? And these are good questions. But the question I would ask them is, why are you comfortable holding dollars? Why do you think the dollar has value? Because the dollar used to be backed by gold, and now it's backed by faith and credit. And as we've said before, if you want to deal with faith, then, deal with your local clergyman. There are priests and rabbis and other clergy people that will help you with issues of faith. But in this case, when it's the US government, you would have to have faith in the credit of an organization that is $36 trillion in debt, that is printing trillions of additional dollars to pay off debts. We are now at the point where we are printing dollars to pay the interest expense on dollars that we printed last year. And we've used this terminology before, but if that to you sounds a little bit like a Ponzi scheme, you got it. It is exactly what a Ponzi scheme is. The US dollar at this point, despite being the world's reserve currency, is in full Ponzi status. We are printing to pay the interest on last year's printing. And so that is where they're going. And they've made it crystal clear that that is going to continue. Congress, the Federal Reserve, the Treasury Department, they're going to do nothing to stop this. The dollar is going to be debased into oblivion. And so, why are you comfortable owning dollars and questioning Bitcoin? And if you're somebody who's saying, okay, wait, but I don't know, I'm not sure. Okay, totally fair point. But then don't be a Bitcoin maxi. Take a 1% position. Take 1% of your assets, buy Bitcoin with it, leave it alone. And if it works, then it'll be a meaningful return for you. And if it doesn't, then you take a 1% loss and you live to fight another day.
Great stuff, Gary, on this week's version of the five things. This version was titled The Central Bankers Are Delusional Issue. Plenty of delusion, irony coming from our banks these days. As always, Deep Knowledge Investing is going to keep you in tune with everything happening in the markets during our five things show. Again, please head to our website, deepknowledgeinvesting.com. Consider signing up for a premium subscription. We're confident that you'll see the value and potential return in the different positions that Gary's putting out, when to buy, also when he's closing out positions, research and information, stock tips, etc., the whole 9 yards, as well as just keeping a pulse on the market in general. We also have a free version that you can sign up for that will run you into some paywalls for the premium content, but you'll at least be notified when new content and material comes out, as well as some non-paid version of content that we do produce on a regular basis as well. Gary, any closing thoughts?
Just a few, Rob. First of all, thanks for doing this. Always enjoy our weekly chats. Round of applause for DKI's interns, Andrew and Alex, who do a phenomenal job on this piece every week. We really appreciate their efforts. Round of applause as well for the University of Tennessee Finance Program. They are turning out some really top students at a place where, you know, when you're talking about top business programs, they might not be the first name to come to mind, but the people I've spoken with there are impressive. And so, round of applause for them. They're doing a phenomenal job preparing their young people for careers in finance. I think the intellectual horsepower we're seeing coming out of that program is fantastic. I'd put them up against anybody I've seen. And we've seen that a lot, Rob. A lot of our interns have come from places like Hofstra and Rutgers. But boy, those kids are in many ways better prepared than some of the Ivy League kids I've seen. So good for them. They're doing a terrific job. And then for everyone watching this, you know, I was just want to thank you for your time. We know it's valuable. We appreciate you spending that time with us every week, and we will look forward to seeing you with 5 new things a week from today. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.